CNN, 22nd of March 2024, the most recent flashpoint in India-China border tensions is a high-altitude tunnel. As a defensive measure against a belligerent China, India has initiated the construction of counter-Chinese military infrastructure. The construction of a conduit in mountainous northeastern India has emerged as the most recent flashpoint in an ongoing border dispute between Beijing and New Delhi. Inaugurated earlier this month by Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, the Sela Tunnel has been lauded in India as an engineering marvel. It was excavated at an altitude of approximately 3,900 meters, 13,000 feet, and a military boon. It provides expedited, all-weather access to a tense de facto border with China. This has captured the interest of Beijing, whose nuclear-armed rivalries with New Delhi have clashed over their disputed 2,100-mile, 3,379-kilometer, border in recent years. In the western stretches of the frontier, Aksai Chin-Ladakh, in 2020, at least 20 Indian and 4 Chinese soldiers perished in hand-to-hand combat between the opposing forces. Additionally, the dispute precipitated a conflict decades ago. China asserts sovereignty over the Indian state of Arunachal Pradesh, the location of the tunnel's construction, even though the region has historically been under Indian control. Recently, Chinese officials have condemned the tunnel project and Modi's visit to the state, accusing New Delhi of attempting to disrupt tranquility along the border. Any action by the Indian party that could potentially complicate the boundary dispute must cease. The Chinese military maintains a state of extreme vigilance and will steadfastly safeguard national sovereignty and territorial integrity, a spokesperson for the Defense Ministry said last week, referring to Arunachal Pradesh by the Chinese fanatical designation Xiangnan or South Tibet. India responded on Tuesday by condemning Beijing's irrational assertions and asserting that the region remains an intrinsic and inviolable component of India always. Amid a news conference on Wednesday, the United States State Department expressed strong opposition to any unilateral attempts to advance territorial claims by incursions or encroachments across the line of actual control, LAC, also known as the de facto border. It endorsed India's sovereignty over Arunachal Pradesh. Beijing responded in kind, alleging that Washington spared no effort to incite and exploit the conflicts of other nations for its self-serving geopolitical gain. The dispute highlights the profound animosities that underpin the relationship between the two largest nations in Asia. It occurs in the weeks leading up to national elections in India, which are anticipated to yield a resounding approval of Modi's Hindu nationalist platform. An escalation in nationalism during Modi's tenure has coincided with a comparable development in China, where Xi Jinping has presided over an assertive foreign policy. However, both nations have seemingly taken measures to diffuse border tensions in the wake of the deadly conflict in 2020. On Friday, Modi embarked on a visit to Bhutan to strengthen the partnership between India and Bhutan, he wrote on the social media platform X. Arunachal Pradesh, which shares a remote Himalayan country with China, also has a disputed border with the latter, and New Delhi has expressed caution regarding the possibility of a resolution between Chinese and Himalayan leaders regarding this issue. Controversial dispute. At the beginning of his visit to Arunachal Pradesh earlier this month, Prime Minister Narendra Modi lauded the Sela Tunnel, describing it as an engineering marvel, in addition to numerous other development initiatives involving border infrastructure. These initiatives are a component of his administration's increased effort to develop Indian territory along the disputed border. This drive, which Beijing has indicated it is closely monitoring, contradicts the Indian government's long-held belief that failing to develop the treacherous terrain would deter Chinese invasion or encroachment. Over half of the 118 infrastructure development projects, roads, bridges, and airfields, initiated by the Border Roads Organization of India in Arunachal Pradesh and Ladakh along the disputed border with China last year were located in these regions. With this development, Beijing has accused India of complicating the boundary dispute and disrupting the situation in the border regions between the two countries. Nonetheless, decades of Chinese road and infrastructure construction provided India with a significant advantage over New Delhi in deploying troops to border regions. India also constructed hundreds of shilkong, or villages, which Beijing denies are intended to enforce its land claims. Observers assert that India is attempting to rectify this imbalance. Having come to understand the advantages of border infrastructure, India is expediting its construction endeavors to catch up to China. However, its endeavors are also likely to escalate tensions with China and inspire Beijing to redouble its construction efforts, said Byron Chong, a research associate at the Center on Asia and Globalization at the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy in Singapore. The Sela Tunnel, which connects Tawang, Arunachal Pradesh, and the state of Assam, has presumably attracted particular interest from Beijing due to the region's critical nature and its location along the line of actual control. According to New Delhi, the initiative will increase the readiness of the armed forces. Indian authorities report that a non-lethal altercation took place between the two factions in Tawang towards the end of 2022. Then, New Delhi accused People's Liberation Army personnel of China of attempting to cross the Lak to unilaterally alter the status quo. However, considering its importance in Tibetan Buddhism and China's apprehensions regarding the succession of spiritual leader the Dalai Lama, Tawang may also be of particular significance to Beijing, according to Manoj Kwalramani, the head of Indo-Pacific Studies at the Takshashila Institution Research Center in Bangalore. Since a failed 1959 uprising against Chinese rule of Tibet, during which Beijing suppressed religious practice and attempted to exert control over Tibetan Buddhism, the 88-year-old Dalai Lama has resided in exile in India. Much of the current pressure, on Arunachal Pradesh, stems from anticipating when that catastrophe will occur. About China's anticipated response from India and the possible repercussions that may ensue, he elaborated. However, despite the party's border militarization and China's ongoing efforts to solidify its territorial assertions through its official language and maps, diplomatic initiatives have been undertaken to diffuse tensions in the wake of the deadly conflict in 2020. Last August, Modi and Xi reached a consensus to intensify efforts to mitigate tensions during an off-site meeting at South Africa's BRICS summit. Additionally, frontier negotiations between the Indian and Chinese militaries have continued, the most recent occurred last month, during which both sides reaffirmed their efforts to maintain peace and tranquility.